Hi everybody, welcome to the Midland ACS Centennial Exhibit here at Rao Hall on the campus of Central Michigan University. My name is Gina Malcheski. I am a senior member of the Midland ACS board, and I was the head of the committee that put this exhibit together back in 2019, our 100th anniversary. I want to thank Jim Malek, who is behind the camera today, for videoing this exhibit, and as he did with the first version of it, which was located at the Doane Center in Midland, Michigan. So we're going to go through the exhibit quickly just to give you an idea of what's here. And also I want to express a lot of appreciation to the Museum Studies Department here at Central Michigan University, who was a collaborator with us as we developed this exhibit, and it has been a wonderful set of colleagues to work with over the 5 years that we have been here on their campus. So first, here in a display case, which is relatively new from 2023, is a celebration of moles. The mole is a symbol of chemistry that ACS uses throughout its publications, and especially as a means to communicate chemistry to kids. So we invite people to visit this exhibit, see all the various forms that moles are available in, and also in many of our publications that are available through the ACS website, you can see how moles appear, especially for the younger grades, in that kind of communication. So if we move on over here, you'll see a number of display cases that feature different items of interest, some of them historical, some of them rather new. This first one is a quilt that was put together by Marcel Molzon, a longtime ACS member, for us for the anniversary year, and it's made from different t-shirts that we had available because of National Chemistry Week over the years, and various events that we put on for which we had shirts made. So it's beautiful and interesting to see all the different ways we sort of advertised ourselves by wearing these shirts about what ACS does, and we really appreciate the efforts of Marcel to make this for us. In this display, we have information about chemistry sets that have been available over the years. They start with this one from 1936, and you can really see a difference over the years with the contents and the types of materials that are in those. Chemistry evolved from the study of alchemy, which was prevalent in the Middle Ages. People were trying to understand what materials were made of, and of course everyone was involved in the pursuit of turning materials into gold, which was very valuable, which is not possible, but in the process of that kind of an effort, people did learn a lot more about chemistry, and eventually we moved from this, the table of alchemy symbols, to the periodic table, which we'll see later on in the exhibit. So the difference between these sets include the number of chemicals provided in the set, the safety of the chemicals provided in the set, and the actual types of materials that housed the chemicals in the sets. We have everything in glass, including test tubes in the 1930s, and all kinds of dangerous chemicals available. And then we proceed into the 1970s, where everything is now plastic, much fewer chemicals available. And there actually is another set here from 1989 where most of the materials are sourced outside of the U.S., but it is a set that's actually sold in the U.S. And there's a focus on test tubes take up a lot of the set, but they're plastic now, and they're very large. And there's actually not very many chemicals in here, and many of them would probably be available in your kitchen. So the next display talks about the chairs over the years that we've had. We've been very fortunate to have some excellent leaders over the last 105 years now that Midland ACS has been involved in the area, and we actually cover 5 counties, and that would be Midland, Saginaw, Bay, Gratiot, and Isabella. So we try to keep up activities in all those sections, and we certainly invite all the academics and the industry people, as well as students, scientists, and anyone interested in science to participate. Here we have a signed copy of a version of the periodic table that was made by J. Franklin Hyde, who was a pioneer in silicone chemistry. And it is centered around the element silicon, which is no surprise given his background. And we also have various artifacts, awards won by different ACS members. And very important, we want to thank our benefactors who helped us fund this exhibit back in 2019. These are a lot of local foundations, many of them started by ACS members that were pioneers in chemistry at the Dow Chemical Company or Dow Corning Corporation. So it all started back in the late 1800s when H.H. Dow, who had graduated from what is now Case Western Reserve University, came to Midland interested in the brine. Brine is a mixture of salt and water, but in brine, in the ground, are many, many different elements that can be used for various purposes. One of those was bromine, which at the time was very useful for photography. And of course, photography in those days is very different than the digital photography we have today. Also very important in the development of medicines. So the exhibit is put together sort of around in a circle here, and the panels are color-coded to cover different sort of segments of interest in the exhibit. And we certainly aren't going to go through all the text that are on these panels, but there's a lot of important information on them, including some questions to think about. They start with the history of the founding of the section, which of course was in 1919. We got our charter from National in December of that year, and the first chair was H.H. Dow. It started out as a group of scientists at the Dow Chemical Company who were looking for a platform by which to communicate with each other and maybe to encourage communication with the outside world. Here in Midland, we were in the middle of what used to be a forested, fairly small town area in the middle of Michigan, where a lot of the chemistry that was happening in the United States was elsewhere, of course, in large cities and towns. So getting involved with people located at these various universities, institutions, and industries was very important for the scientists here to keep up with what was happening. Now, National ACS was actually founded by a woman in 1876, and on this panel you can see about Rachel Bodley. She suggested the society form, and she was also the founding member. The first, actually, the first chair was a man, but later on in another panel you'll hear about Rachel Holloway, who was the second female member, who was the first female PhD in chemistry in the United States. So what is chemistry? It's the study of everything. Matter is anything that takes up space, which is anything you can pretty much think of. And matter is composed of chemicals, and chemicals are made up of atoms, which represent different elements. So all the elements which are on the periodic table, one of the features of the exhibit that we'll get to in a minute, those represent what everything in the universe is made of. And atoms are particles that compose those elements, and within atoms there are other particles that move around, especially electrons, which allow us to do chemical reactions. Molecules are organizations, combinations of elements. So we didn't want to miss out on updating people about what happened after our anniversary year. So we do have a display here talking about some of the things that happened during COVID, which was a big blow to our plans. When we did the first exhibit, we ended right before the pandemic started, and then we were fortunate to be able to move the components of the exhibit over here to Central Michigan and allow them, the pandemic did allow them time to refurbish the space and make it appropriate for the installation of our exhibit. But during COVID, which was just like 100 years before that, when ACS had been founded and the pandemic, the flu pandemic of 1918-19 was occurring, we had our own pandemic 100 years later. And that did not stop the ACS section from continuing to do what we believe is our work. We still gathered together virtually to have meetings, and we still did a lot of outreach with the community during the pandemic, but just keeping in mind all the safety precautions that we needed to for interacting with the public. So this grouping of panels talks about how the first members of the society grew in number and how they how the meetings progressed and what happened at those meetings, because they were pretty different than what we have today. Today we focus on usually the activities of the section and forthcoming plans. In those days, there were really no telephones, no TVs, no ways for social communication of any advanced variety. So these meetings were a way for people to get together, and yes, they exchanged information about chemistry. They had talks. In some cases later on, they had films. They had speakers come in, and ACS was actually fortunate to host a couple of Nobel Prize-winning chemists as speakers over the years. But these were also social events. These were places where people could get together and just talk about life and things that happened. They did skits. They performed music. They told stories. If you look back at the minutes, and we have those in our archives here on the CMU campus at Clark Library, you will see they even discussed their fishing adventures and who caught what kind of fish before the meeting. So these were definitely social events. They started out all male, but eventually females started to participate, and over the years, not till 1989 though, when Gretchen Cole became our first woman chair, did we really have leadership that was female. This panel talks about Sylvia Stacer, who was probably the first female member of the Midland section of the American Chemical Society, and worked it down, was very highly regarded by the men that she worked with. So this continues to talk about forms of communication between our section and our local community as well as the world. It talks in general about chemists and the way they communicate with other people. So we have meetings, of course, where we can meet in person, and often those meetings these days are hybrid so that people who can't attend in person can still participate. But we also do lots of face-to-face events, continue to have face-to-face meetings, and of course written publications are very important. So we had a newsletter for some period of time. In the early days, the secretary would publish the minutes, but starting in 1964 we published an official newsletter, and we've had a number of very talented editors over the years. The newsletter continues to this day, but it became digital in about 2015 or so, and it is available free to anyone who wants to subscribe, and the information is on our Facebook page, which is now another means of communication that we have. So in addition to the newsletter, all chemists communicate by chemical publications, and ACS sponsors and is responsible for a number of very high quality communications. Some of them are scientific journals where chemists actually publish their work. And also patents are very important for communication between chemists and the outside world, because they talk about inventions that have been made, new molecules that have been discovered, new ways to synthesize and use molecules, and they absolutely teach other people about how to do that. Of course, patents protect the inventors for some period of time before they become generally available, or they can actually be purchased by other companies or other groups by agreement with the original inventors. But patents are a very, very important form of communication between scientists. Over here we have a display that talks about the electron microscope, which is a very important way that chemists and scientists look at things on a much smaller level. The magnification, when they say electron microscope, it actually uses electrons, electron bombardment of the image to generate a picture of what's inside of a cell, for example. The magnification can be million-fold, and this was very instructive in the understanding the various studies that were done to understand DNA. And in fact, I think the first photograph taken in an electron microscope may have been of a virus in the study of virology, because viruses contain DNA and use DNA for infection. This is property of Central Michigan University, and it was an electron microscope used at the Dow Chemical Company. Here's the periodic table that I referred to. Now, each of those letters, or combination of letters, represent shorthand that chemists use for a scientific element. And we have modified this periodic table to focus on and celebrate members of our section and their contributions to the section and to the larger community. So you will see individuals, and the color coding again does have some meaning in terms of, were they members of industry, were they academics. Some of them represent the female leaders of ACS, and some of them represent the ACS fellows that are in our section. Becoming an ACS fellow is an honor that is bestowed at the national level on chemists who have made a particular contribution to their field as well as to the American Chemical Society. So we invite you to come and look at the many, many contributions, both scientific and service-wise, of the members of our section. Here we have a little short video going from National ACS, which is wonderful. Just talks about a world without chemistry. So we invite you to see that.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. Chemistry. Our life, our future.
Chimia, nossa existência.
Chimie, notre vie, notre futur. Química, nuestra vida, nuestro futuro.
And then this section talks about our interaction more with the place that we live in. So we have had lots to do with academics on various campuses, and in fact, even the dedication and beginning of different colleges in the area had a lot to do with ACS members. ACS members have served on boards of trustees and have also held other positions of leadership, as well as being teachers at local universities. We also, on a much lower level, down into elementary classrooms, we interact with teachers. We go and perform programs, hands-on programs with students to, of course, get them interested in chemistry and science in general, and to make them unafraid of participating or delving into something that they may think is a little intimidating to start with. And of course, this is more than just encouraging kids to pursue and continue the profession of chemistry. It's STEM education is really important to our country as well, and we want to establish some basic proficiencies across the board in all of our people, because as life becomes more complicated and technology as a greater and greater role, we want people to understand what's happening and to use critical thinking to make important decisions that we know are just going to get more complicated as time goes on. Besides going into classrooms, we participate, and some of those visits have to do with the science coaching program, which was started by Tom Lane, who is an ACS member, has held various positions on our board, has also been a national president in 2009. One of his projects at the national level was to start the science coaching program, which allowed members or any scientific professional to pair up with teachers and to visit their classrooms or to have a collaboration with them that they would describe whether or not they needed someone to help with moving dangerous chemicals from a stockroom, or they wanted help behind the scenes beefing up their own chemistry knowledge, or if they wanted people to come into the classroom to do things with the kids. That's what we allow that relationship to take shape based on what the teachers are looking for. So science coaching goes on right now, and it started in about 2009, continues today, and each teacher that participates gets $500 for their classroom. What really started our interaction with the public with regard to STEM education and encouragement of children in the sciences is the Bringing Science to Life project that started happening in the late 80s, early 90s. That was, again, our attempt to listen to teachers, find out what they needed, and present them with something that they could do on their own in their classroom and feel comfortable with it, where we actually I identified all the supplies, described all the chemistry, and divided chemistry activities up into several dozen activities that they could do with simple household materials and to involve their children more directly with the study of science. And since then, we have done various other versions, updated the Bringing Science to Life to Classroom, and we also have done teacher workshops over the years across the country to train teachers to be more comfortable and to give them some ideas of what they can do in the classroom. So we're out in the community, as I mentioned, bringing science to the public, and of course Midland, with its history, sort of built around Dow. So Dow came here when there was not much else here and built an industry which then expanded, and of course the town sort of grew up around Dow Chemical, and many of the benefits we have in this community today are due to the efforts, the presence of Dow Chemical, the philanthropic efforts also of Dow Chemical, Dow Corning, and now Corteva and DuPont that are here that make the life in the Great Lakes Bay Area a lot different than it would have been without the presence of these companies in our midst, as well as the academic institutions that have grown up around us. So we have historical recognitions like the National Historical Chemical Landmark. That was a program started relatively recently within National ACS, and Midland is lucky to have a number of these sites. We have one where the Dow brine well was first located in Midland, and we recently got another one. Actually, there's two more. One for the presence of where the building used to be located, in which the first GC mass spec instrument was created at the Dow Chemical Company, and that is a very useful instrument for identifying chemicals in a mixture, for example, and that stands for gas chromatography mass spectroscopy. And very recently, we got another one for Dow was hired the first black chemist PhD to work, and that was Betty Washington Green, who had a career at Dow Chemical and was very successful. So, and she, of course, is an example to many others where barriers have been broken across the years by the companies here and the ACS section in general. So again, a listing, or not a listing, but a highlighting of a few officers over the years that have been very important. And diversity has increased in the Midland ACS section, just as hopefully it has done elsewhere, when we all became more aware and more appreciative of the contributions and the possibilities, the benefits of including everyone in the section. Besides our local board and people who make contributions at the local level, many of our members are active in national committees and attend national meetings a couple times a year. And this panel highlights those and the impacts that we've had on the national stage. Besides, of course, the 2 members that we have had who have been national ACS presidents, which include, of course, as I mentioned, Tom Lane and also E.C. Britton in the 1950s. So for our efforts, ACS has been recognized. We have been recognized at the ACS level every year. The National ACS provides awards for the local sections in various categories depending on what they might do relative to education, to involving other divisions of chemistry, for example, business partnerships, all kinds of aspects of chemistry involved in outreach and in the scientific community. So we have been very fortunate to have received many of these awards over our history. The awards did not start until the 60s, and the current award program began in the late 90s. We just had the 25th anniversary of the Chem Luminary Awards, and at this point, Midland ACS has won 12 outstanding section awards in our size category in a row. So, and before that, we won some other interspersed in the years before that. But we've done an outstanding and continue to do a great job in various aspects of bringing science to the outside community. This is a very important part of the section. More of the information in this section could be displayed in another environment, but because we were short on space here at CMU, we had to curtail this section of the exhibit a little bit, but we didn't want to ignore the controversies associated with chemistry, even in our own backyard. We want to make sure everybody understands that ACS members are to abide by a code of conduct that's published by ACS, and ACS publishes expectations of their members and the activities that happen in laboratories, et cetera. Of course, ACS is very aware of and in the forefront of safety in the laboratory. But this tells you our code of conduct, and then we do talk about the fact that the pursuit of chemistry necessarily is a human activity, and when chemists make new materials, for example, they spend time identifying and characterizing those materials and what they do, but that science is ongoing. Science as an endeavor itself is constantly ongoing, and people are trying to always improve on our knowledge of chemistry and the chemicals that chemistry allows us to use in everyday life. So we have had some local controversies with regard to dioxin in the water here in Midland, and this poster tells you a little bit about that and the fact and the cleanups that have resulted from that. And there, of course, there have been many arguments over the years about chemicals in foods, for example, the uses of herbicide and pesticide. And the DDT controversy is very well known. We did not have to worry about that, particularly here in Midland. It didn't involve any of our institutions. But Dow did make, for many years, herbicides and pesticides. And over a period of time, those did have positive impacts on our ability to make crops to feed people and to eliminate the damage due to crops from these sources. But of course, over time, we find more out about their toxicology, what happens when they get into the environment. And toxicology is a very important field to pair with the study of chemistry, because we do need to understand what our chemicals do when they are in different environments, whether it's in water, whether it's in soil, whether it's in our body, and where it might be in our body. Does it accumulate there? Does it have a negative impact? So toxicology has been part of chemistry for a long time, and there's always ongoing studies to understand more about the chemicals that we deal with on a daily basis. One big aspect of toxicology and unintended consequences, and I say unintended because no chemist sets out to make a material that's going to have a negative impact anywhere. They're always doing it for a perceived benefit. So in one thing that Dow Corning, a market that Dow Corning participated in over the years was breast implants. Dow Corning was a co-owned business with partners, with a partnership between Dow and Corning, and it was focused on Si chemistry. Si, or silicon, being one of the elements on the periodic table. It is used in electronics in some forms. Other forms it's used to make sticky or rubbery materials that have many, many different applications. One of those, the products that was made by the medical group within Dow Corning was breast implants. And those started to be sold in the 1960s, and then there started to be public concerns when FDA was reviewing medical products that hadn't gone through the standard process that had sort of been grandfathered in at a certain point. And many women started to file lawsuits because they had medical issues which they attributed to the presence of breast implants in their body. So there's a little video over in this part of the exhibit that explains or attempts to give you background on that whole incident.
Many of the conveniences of our modern life are made possible by chemistry. From clean water and drugs to plastics and electronics.
Chemistry, like all science, is a process. We experiment, we make, we discover, we learn. Time and usage sometimes reveal unintended consequences of our work, which can be either good or bad or both. The purpose of this video is to provide a case study that has had a local impact and has involved Midland ACS members. We also want to encourage the viewer to appreciate the problem solving that is at the core of chemistry and the challenges associated with products once they leave the lab.
A hazard is something that has the potential to cause us harm. For any given hazard, the risk is the chance that harm will actually occur. For example, a wet floor is a hazard, and there is a certain risk, chance, that walking across it could cause a fall. In everyday life, we participate in activities or make decisions that involve accepting risk, even if we don't realize it. When we drive a car or eat at a restaurant, we are accepting a risk that we might get in an accident or get food poisoning. These actions are viewed by most of us as low risk. There is no activity that is totally risk-free. We examine our choices in life and choose things that we hope have more benefits than risks. If we know what we need to about the choices, we can make informed decisions to decide whether the risk is worth the potential benefit. Chemists in the laboratory seek to make new discoveries that have significant benefits to society. Determining potential hazards and gauging risk is an ongoing responsibility.
As early as 1959, Dow Corning and Midland began creating silicone products for potentially life-saving medical applications, starting with a shunt designed by Connecticut toolmaker John Holter for his son with hydrocephalus, which had no effective treatment. This disease caused fluid to collect on the boy's brain with devastating results. John approached Dow Corning looking for high-quality silicone to make a valve for his shunt. The resulting device was then implanted in his son and other patients who accepted the risk of trying a new treatment for the possible benefits it could provide. It worked. The interest that arose from this success had unforeseen positive consequence of providing a platform on which Dow Corning's Center for Aid to Medical Research was founded.
After that, silicones were pursued for a number of medical applications because they had useful chemical and mechanical properties, were easily molded, and testing indicated they were benign in the body. Some of these medical products included sponges to treat eye problems and fluids for coating syringe needles to make shots less painful. In 1962, Dow Corning introduced a silicone breast implant used for post-breast cancer reconstructive surgery and eventually for elective breast augmentation.
Before 1976, the criteria for FDA approval of medical devices were different than for the testing of drugs. although device components were tested using the best methods available. In 1977, Dow Corning lost its first lawsuit against a plaintiff who said her implants made her sick. Eventually, the FDA required new proof that these implantable devices were safe and effective to keep them on the market, and gave manufacturers a deadline for providing such data. Some women were ill, and many became convinced that their implants were responsible because of the FDA's request for more testing. A steady increase in lawsuits against Dow Corning followed. By December 1991, there were 137 lawsuits. A year later, the number was over 3,500. By December 1993, over 12,000.
The head of the FDA called for companies to voluntarily stop selling breast implants in 1992, with exceptions for specific patients. This decision caused even greater concern among some women. In 1995, Dow Corning was facing 20,000 lawsuits and filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which froze the litigation. During this time, the controversy also caused manufacturers of other medical devices to worry about the liability associated with continuing to sell their products. Fewer available medical products meant that options for patients and doctors were now limited, another unintended negative outcome. Numerous international studies and expert panels continued to find no link between implants and various diseases. For many women, weighing the science against the other publicity was difficult and confusing, and they were negatively impacted by an inability to make informed decisions about their healthcare. The breast implant dispute did provide some positive consequences, however. Better testing of medical materials and more comprehensive risk assessment practices by manufacturers. New information was available about the effects of silicones in the body, and as a result of the additional data, FDA allowed silicone breast implants to return to the market in 2005. Breast implants are now readily available, though not from Dow Corning. And in 2018, breast implant procedures were the most commonly performed type of plastic surgery.
Chemical controversies, especially those since Silent Spring in the 1960s, have had consequences, both good and bad, that continue today. While some of us may be frustrated with what we think is inadequate attention to these issues, we should note that sometimes hazards and risks may take time to identify because the tools we use are constantly evolving. Green chemistry is an initiative to design the materials of the future and optimize their impacts at intended points of use and beyond, whether that's in the kitchen, in the body, or in the environment. Chemists, including Midland ACS members like me, have a mission to make the world a better place, and our commitments to the planet and to our discipline demand we work together and learn from the past.
Well, welcome to the tower. This is the center focal point of the exhibit, and a lot of things are happening at the tower. We have along each side of it a different aspect that we're trying to focus on, the majority of them being materials that have had global impact, that were invented by members of Midland ACS. If we start here with processes and tools, this is to celebrate chemical engineers and what they do, and the people who configure the materials that we use in the lab every day. So if a chemist synthesizes a material at the benchtop and people study it and find out that it has great benefits and they want to commercialize it, they have to figure out how to make larger amounts of it. This is more than just doubling a cake recipe or anything like that, because the more, when we're talking about perhaps hundreds of gallons in a very, very large mixer to make the quantities that we want to make, we have to change the process techniques accordingly. We need to make sure that heat is distributed evenly throughout, that there's proper mixing, etc., so that we get a material that has the qualities or characteristics that we're looking for. So chemical engineers, process engineers are the people who help us do that to make chemicals. Over the years, of course, chemists have used many tools in the laboratory, starting with things as simple as glassware. The glassware has evolved over time glass has its advantages and disadvantages. It's very inert, but it also is fragile in some cases. But we have made glassware in different shapes and sizes depending on what it is used for. We've put markings on it to help us measure materials as we're working in the laboratory. And of course, many of the things that we use today are now made of plastic, if the plastic is appropriate for the materials that we're working with. The little apparatus that you see there in the left-hand corner is called a coleoperat, and that is on the ACS logo. That is a very important piece of equipment that was developed, I believe, in the 1830s by Justice Liebig, and that was a very important piece of equipment that was used to better understand what organic materials are made of and how much carbon, for example, might be in an organic material. So if we move to the right here along the tower, we will see that we talk about silly putty, for example. There's a little bit of controversy out in the literature about who invented it, but Dow Corning scientists were actually the first people to patent it, get a U.S. patent on it. And so this started out, like so many things in the laboratory, with the idea that the chemist wanted to make a particular thing. It was during World War II. There was a lot of fighting in the Pacific, and the sources of natural rubber, the islands in the Pacific that generated natural rubber, were controlled by the Japanese. So rubber was very important during World War II, and that's why many people, tires were a very important commodity, but we needed to find a substitute for natural rubber, and so Dow Corning scientists went into the lab looking for that. Given the properties of silicones, it was a perfectly logical extension of what the current knowledge to think that we might be able to make a substitute with a silicone compound. So Rob Roy McGregor was one of the inventors. They went into the lab, and Earl Warwick, they went into the lab, and instead of getting the rubber that they wanted, they made this material, which is called a dilatant compound, which has very unusual properties. When you stretch it slowly, it stretches for a long time before it breaks, but when you pull it quickly, it breaks immediately. So it has unusual properties, but they couldn't really find a commercial use for this. And so in 1959 at Easter time, the first silly putty came out as a toy for kids. And because it was Easter, it came out in an egg, and it has been produced and sold in an egg ever since. If we follow this around, also on the table here at the tower, you will see in front of each display there is something more information about what the display discusses, and there are also a number of chemistry molecular model kits where people can play and sort of use the structures that are on the table to try to mimic them or to make their own molecules as they see fit. But each part of the tower does describe the chemistry of the material that's highlighted, its advantages, its disadvantages, etc. So here we have saran wrap. Saran wrap was also invented by Ralph Wiley, working in the lab. I think he was a relatively young, maybe technician in the laboratory, and he identified this material that was accidentally made, polyvinylidene dichloride, and that was found to be able to be made in a very, very thin film that had useful characteristics. It was made into what's called saran wrap that was used to, of course, keep air away from food, a very flexible packaging material to make it easy to wrap whatever you wanted to, store it away. It was also used for other things. You see a lawn chair that was made. Depending on the process used to make it, it could be made in different thicknesses, etc., and used for that purpose. Since it was purchased by S.C. Johnson, the chemistry is different with the saran wrap today versus the way it was made in the 1940s and 50s, and it no longer contains the compound PVDC. Instead, it is polyethylene, in part for safety purposes. So the next one, this just sort of introduces you to the entire exhibit and tells you about the fact that our members have contributed not only locally but globally to science in general, and that it is pretty amazing at the far reach that Midland ACS members and the materials that they worked on have in the world today. In between these girders, you will see QR codes and a picture of a molecule. The molecules that are featured in the exhibit have been incorporated into an augmented reality format or an app that you can use on your phone. You can look at the QR code and it will take you to a place where you can see the molecule, and the molecule rotates in 3 dimensions. You can actually control the movement of the molecule in 3D space, and a voiceover explains to you more about what that molecule is and what it is used for. So as we go again to the right, we see styrofoam. This is the trademark name that Dow gave its expanded polystyrene foam, specifically the variety or the form of it that was used in the construction industry. And you still see those blue boards when people are building their houses that have the styrofoam logo on them. Styrofoam is a form of polystyrene that has a lot of air incorporated into it, so its density is very low, but it's very good at insulating. Other forms of this polystyrene that's manufactured in different ways will have different qualities and different uses. The styrofoam is found to be in many, many different products, of course. It's used today in a lot of disposable plasticware for food. It can be fully recycled if you can find a recycling center to take it, and not all of them do, but it is 100% recyclable, and people have been working on biological ways to decompose it as well. And it is number 6 with, if you look at the resin identification code that's on the bottom of plastics, you will find it as number 6, but it can be brittle or it can be flexible depending on the form. Our last material here is super absorbent polymer, sometimes called SAP. That also comes in many forms, and that was invented as well by Dow scientists, not in Midland initially, but it was perfected and taken on. The processing was focused on by a Midland ACS member named Fred Buchholz, who has written a large book on superabsorbent polymer. That's used in diapers. That is how disposable diapers work, with the polymer on the inside that actually swells in the presence of liquid. So that is the part of the diaper that does the job that you're looking for. And since it was first invented, it has been undergoing, of course, changes to try to make it more environmentally friendly, and to have the way that diapers are made, to have the insides and the outsides be made of more recyclable materials. SAP is also used. The first reason that people wanted to make something like that was to be able to use it in an agricultural situation to help hold water in certain places where maybe it didn't rain that often. You could water it. This material holds water for a lengthy period of time. And in fact, in some places you can see, especially in cities, you can see trees that may be in a hole in the sidewalk, and around the base of the tree is a little plastic covering that actually has superabsorbent polymer on the inside that is holding water there for the plant, so they don't need to actually be watered as frequently. You can also buy SAP polymer in various forms, little beads that expand in water, or what's called instant snow in a more flaky form. So a fun material, but also a material that has very important uses. And with that, we've completed our tour of the CMU version of the Midland ACS Centennial Exhibit. We hope you'll come and see it for yourself, or follow the progress of this installation on Facebook. And we also have a Centennial website, MidlandACS100.org, and of course the main website of MidlandACS.org, which is where you'll find out all about our current activities, including the destinations to be visited by the exhibit or its components.